All right, so for number 44, we have activists. Although the environmental bill before the legislator is popular with voters, it will have mainly negative economic consequences if it is passed, especially when we try to lure new businesses to our country. Okay, so we're saying that although this bill is popular with voters, it's going to have more negative economic consequences if it's passed, especially when we try to bring in new business. Okay, cool. Great leaders have the courage to look beyond popularity to what is sound policy. Legislators ought to do the same by not voting for the bill. All right, so the activist here is giving us some background information here about what's going to happen. So we're saying, hey, like, yeah, like this is popular with the voters, but there's going to be negative consequences. And then I would almost call this next sentence where it's bringing in great leaders kind of like a principle or a generalization where we're saying like, hey, great leaders are able to look beyond popularity and to look at what sound policy is. And so what this activist is referring back to is, hey, we need to look at the long-term effects. So maybe like, hey, like what are these economic consequences? And not just focus on like what's popular with the voters. And then we go on to say to what our main conclusion is going to be, and what this activist is arguing for is legislator ought to do the same by not voting for this bill. All right, so we have a flaw question here. So we want to go ahead and predict what is this author assuming or taking for granted or failing to consider. And so it's like, why should we not vote for this bill? So my biggest issue here is while there are going to be mainly negative economic consequences, what is better, economic consequences or maybe this environmental bill? And so I'm like, I feel like this activist is failing to consider that, yeah, maybe these economic consequences are actually worth it. So let's go ahead and go into our answer choices. So A says presumes without providing, so assumes most, so more than 50% of the legislators. No, we don't assume that most of them are great leaders. B, presumes without providing justification. So assumes that a bill is less likely to pass if it is deemed to have negative. No, we don't assume that something is less likely or more likely to pass either way. We're just trying to say that they shouldn't vote on the bill. All right. C says fails to consider whether there are non-economic reasons for supporting the bill that outweigh the reasons given for rejecting it. Yeah, I love this. This is exactly what I predicted. This author fails to consider, so he ignores whether there are non-economic reasons for voting for the bill that are more beneficial or better than the reasons given for rejecting it. And the reason given for rejecting it is just this economic consequence. So I love C. D says fails to specify whether legislators usually consider economic consequences when a bill, like, no, we don't, it doesn't matter if they usually consider them or don't usually consider them. We're just saying they shouldn't vote for it. Our conclusion is they should not vote for it, and we don't care about what they normally do. E says takes for granted or assumes that if a bill is popular, it will not be. No, we don't assume that if a bill is popular, it's automatically not economical. And that is why our answer choice is C.